A god appears, almost out of nowhere. His origins are shrouded in mystery, with no ancient cult and no single story that explains him. And yet, within a few decades, he becomes one of the most important deities of the Hellenistic world. His name was Serapis. But who was he, really? Ancient sources do not agree. In fact, they give us not one, but 4 different origin stories. A statue brought from Sinope, a tradition from Seleucia, a tale tied to Alexander himself, and a deeper, older Egyptian identity, hidden in plain sight. At first glance, it all feels like a contradiction. But what if these stories are not random? What if they are pieces of the same puzzle? Sarapis shares with the other Greek gods a basic characteristic: anthropomorphism. Unlike the Egyptian gods, he is not depicted with the head of an animal. He is depicted as a man of mature age, with lush hair and beard, and a cylindrical head covering, the modion or calatheon. He is the heir of Greek deities such as Zeus, Dionysus, whom Plutarch identifies with Osiris, and Asclepius. Let's take a look at the various myths. The Sinopean narrative. The Sinope narrative has 3 variations, common features of which are the attempt of King Ptolemy, the first to obtain a statue of Hades from Sinope in Pontus, the difficulties he encountered, the role of dreams, and the persistence of the god himself. According to one of these variations, not only did the statue board the ship voluntarily, but the journey from Sinope to Alexandria only took 3 days. When, according to Plutarch, it reached Alexandria, Ptolemy's courtiers concluded from the representation with Cerberus that the statue was of Hades, but took the name of Sarapis, because that was how the Egyptians called the god of the underworld. Here, the Sinopean account, as conveyed to us by Plutarch, hints that the name Serapis was already in use before the establishment of the cult. The Patriarch of Alexandria tells the story of Pharaoh Sesostris, who, after subduing most of the Greek tribes, returned to Egypt with skilled craftsmen, one of whom, mixing various materials, including the medicine left over from the funeral of Osiris and Apis, created a statue of Serapis, whose name comes from the compound name Serapis. Serapis from Seleucia of Syria. This is a narrative that we can consider as a variation of the Sinopean narrative and is briefly mentioned, with some versions, by authors such as Tacitus and Clement of Alexandria. The former claims that the statue of Serapis was brought from there by Ptolemy III, and the latter that the Seleucids themselves transported it as a reward for the food aid that the Ptolemies offered them during a time of grain shortage. Serapis in the Life of Alexander. As mentioned, the novel in question was published in various versions. In one of them, Alexander offered a sacrifice on an altar he built near Alexandria during the early days of its founding. However, an eagle snatched the sacrificed carcasses and placed them on a nearby older altar, which, according to the inhabitants of the area, belonged to a sanctuary of Zeus and Hera. He prayed to Serapis, who appeared to him and, among other things, told him that he would subdue the barbarian tribes. The city he founded would always be called Alexandria. Many would desire it. Its goods would multiply, and it would surpass all other cities. In another version, Alexander entered a cave near the city of Babrica, where he saw in the mist someone sitting on a throne who turned out to be Serapis. Dazzled, Alexander said, "He whom I saw worshipped as king in Libya, I see him again here." And Serapis replied, "As the sky appears everywhere as if resting on a hill, so I appear everywhere." Something that is mentioned in both of the aforementioned variations is Alexander's question to Sarapis about when he will die, to which the latter replied that it is good for mortals not to know such a thing, because then it will be as if they were dying every day, until death actually finds them. The Memphite origin. A variation of the above story is that of Apis, a king or wealthy man of Memphis, who donated wheat to Alexandria when the city was plagued by famine. And for this reason, its inhabitants, to thank him, built a temple in his honor in their city, where they carried the body of an ox, also called Apis. According to others, Sarapis is the deified name of Apis, a member of the royal family of Argos, or the third king of the Peloponnese, or according to others of Sinope. The latter story can only be explained if we look back to the mythological connection between ancient Greece and pharaonic Egypt, and specifically to the myth of the Danaans, the mythical king of Egypt Armais, brother of Pharaoh Seth, the mythical king of Attica Erechtheus, who is said to have introduced the Eleusinian mysteries from Egypt, etc. Plutarch briefly mentions that most priests say that Osiris and Apis merged into one form, and teach that Apis is a schematic representation of the soul of Osiris. In this way, Sarapis is linked to Memphis, in whose necropolis Apis, who, according to Egyptian mythology, is transformed into Osiris, or Osiri-Api, is from the 19th dynasty onwards the main god. Common features in the narratives. The first common feature of all four versions is the leading role of a king, either Alexander, or Ptolemy I, or Ptolemy II Philadelphus, or Ptolemy III Euergetes, or Apis, or the pharaoh Sesostris. Another element shared by all founding myths is the introduction of the god from outside the city. Whether from Sinope, or from Seleucia, or from Memphis, or from a hill outside Alexandria, the outside moves within. So the founder of the cult is a king. The cult comes from some city of the Hellenistic world, either as a result of a benevolent act or because the deity himself wanted it. In this way, Serapis is a god of both Greece and Egypt. He comes from both Sinope and Memphis, or from Seleucia as well. He is both a new and an old god, a deity of both Greece and Egypt, with models such as Pluto and Osiris Apis. They say that behind every myth lies a truth. The same is true of the founding myths of Serapis. According to one view, the Sinope narrative is due to the foreign policy of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, when in the first quarter of the 3rd century BC, he became involved in military operations against the Seleucids in the Straits of the Hellespont. In order to secure the alliance, or even the favorable neutrality of Byzantium, the city that controlled the mouth to the strategically important Pontus region, the addition of Sinope, which remained uninvolved in the conflicts, to the founding narrative has been attributed to an attempt to conceal the political aspirations of the second Ptolemy. In a similar way, we can interpret the version of Sarapis's origin from Seleucia. This time, the protagonist is Ptolemy III Euergetes, who, following a successful campaign in Syria, again against the Seleucids, managed to gain control of Seleucia and recover a bust of Osiris, which the Persians had stolen from Egypt centuries before. Let us now look at the life of Alexander. As has been pointed out, the earliest surviving version of the novel is version A. It is likely to have been composed in the 3rd century AD, although its constituent parts were written much earlier. It is also not unlikely that its early elements were enriched with later material, while other parts of the work were composed in the 3rd century AD. As for Sarapis himself, he is presented with holistic expressions of omnipotence that respond to his worship and echo cultural environments that are not appropriate for the early Hellenistic period. The God who provides for this earth, the all-provident God, who sees and governs everything, who governs the vast world, the manifest God of the world, greatest and Lord, the great God of all, Serapis. We can see some connection between Alexander and Sarapis in the works of Ptolemy and Arrian. Plutarch, for example, refers to a certain Serapion, a young comrade of Alexander in the sphere. The most important thing, however, is the reference by Plutarch and Arrian to an incident that took place shortly before Alexander fell ill. The latter, after taking off his royal clothes to exercise, retired from the throne, on which an unknown man soon after came and sat. According to Plutarch, this man was called Dionysius, and due to some offense he was a prisoner. However, it was Serapis who stood before him, untied his bonds, led him there, and ordered him to wear the royal diadem and uniform and to sit silently on the throne. Finally, when Alexander was seriously ill, some of his generals went to the Sarapis of Babylon and asked the god if they should bring Alexander there, to which Serapis replied in the negative. These three references imply, on the one hand, that Alexander's end was approaching, and on the other hand, that the cult of Serapis predates his death. We should not rule out the possibility that Plutarch's account is a later addition, developed in such a way as to explain an incident that tradition had left obscure. For example, if there was indeed a sanctuary of Sarapis in Babylon, the question arises as to when and by whom it was built. It remains to examine now the incidents mentioned by Arrian and Plutarch. As their source, they name the so-called royal journals, a kind of official archive kept by the administration of Alexander the Great. However, a large part of the historical community has questioned its validity with the argument of the existence of political motives. They see behind its sculpting an attempt to conceal the real causes of Alexander's death. The only inscription from that period that is indirectly linked to Sarapis is the so-called Curse of Artemisia. It is a text written on papyrus between the 4th and the 3rd century BC, in which Artemisia, addressing Osiris Apis, curses her daughter's father, claiming that he deprived her of her daughter's burial and offering. The question that arises is why Artemisia uses the ancient and Egyptian name and not the translated name Serapis. Let us finally examine the possibility of Serapis's Memphite origin and whether the Ptolemies indeed had both the interest and the ability to create a literary tradition around the worship of the god. One of the first challenges that Ptolemy had to face was the legitimization of his power, since he had been appointed satrap and not king of Egypt. He founded the sanctuary of Sarapis in Rakoti, and it seems that he played some indirect role in the establishment of Serapii outside Egypt, as can be seen from an inscription in Halicarnassus, which was placed by Arsinoe, later queen and wife of Ptolemy II, and which dates to the years of Ptolemy I. His son Ptolemy II Philadelphus also moved along the same line, and organizing a Dionysian procession in which the statue of Sarapis was followed by the statues of Ptolemy I and Alexander, crowned with golden ivy leaves, standing side by side. A very important move, given that it harnessed the power of the image in an era when not everyone could read. We must also mention Ptolemy, the third Euergetes, who added Serapis and Isis to the royal oath of Egypt, a move that, as already mentioned, involved both religious and political motives. Finally, we should not ignore the contribution of Ptolemy IV, who minted coins with the image of Serapis and Isis. The reference so far to the first 4 Ptolemies was made to demonstrate the great importance that the early Ptolemaic power attached to Serapis. In order to ensure his continued rule of Egypt, Ptolemy sought, even while he was satrap, supports for his power. And because he did not believe he could rely on the lower social classes of the country, he sought the help of the prominent and priestly families and financially strengthened the priesthood of Memphis. His next move was the use of religion, and specifically the establishment of a deity or cult that would keep the population of Egypt cohesive. In this context, he addressed the Egyptian priest Manetho and Timotheus, who is also mentioned in the Sinopean myth, who had already offered his services at the Eleusinian Mysteries, where Pluto was worshipped, among others. The former undertook 2 actions: the translation of the Egyptian divine names into Greek and the recording of the mythical words for Isis, Osiris, Apis, and Serapis. Even though the latter was not a traditional Egyptian god at that time, it was Timotheus who introduced the Plutonian characteristics of Serapis. A process of translation of various Egyptian objects, places, customs followed with the aim of consolidating Ptolemaic power, cultural exchange, and communication. As part of this process, a sandy slope or hill in the Memphis area was translated as Mount Sinopium, while the temple of Osiris Apis itself in the area was translated as Serapion. Based on the above, we would say that Serapis is primarily a god of the Greeks, associated with the Ptolemaic dynasty, which nevertheless seems to respect the religious traditions of the indigenous people, who saw in the name of Serapis their own Osiris Apis, a deity who already enjoyed particular prestige. Therefore, it would not be wrong to agree with the view, according to which the cult of Serapis was established by Ptolemy I, taking as a basis the Osiris Apis of Memphis.